Naomi had just left a local charity event where she spoke about youth empowerment. It was past sunset, and the streets were lined with flickering lamps and the scent of fresh rain. As she turned onto Maple Avenue, red and blue lights flared in her rearview mirror. A white police officer stepped out, face rigid, hand on his holster. "License and registration," he barked without greeting. Naomi complied, calm but confused. She wasn't speeding. Her tags were valid. What was this really about? Officer Todd glanced at her papers without looking her in the eye. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. "Is there a problem?" Naomi asked, voice measured. "I said out," he snapped. With the camera on his chest blinking red, he handcuffed her before she could process what was happening. Her mind raced. What about her rights? Who would believe her? But she remained composed, the years of being a black woman in America, teaching her how to survive moments like this with stillness, not panic. Inside the squad car, Naomi sat in silence. Her hands throbbed from the too tight cuffs. Outside, pedestrians filmed with their phones, but no one intervened. Officer Todd smirked as he pulled away. "Should have stayed home," he muttered under his breath. Naomi turned her gaze to the window, watching familiar buildings blur. She whispered to herself, "He has no idea who I am." Not with pride, but with disbelief. How many others had he done this to? How many hadn't had the connections or the luck to fight back? Power is often mistaken for authority, and authority often confused with justice. But in this moment, what Todd held wasn't law. It was unchecked arrogance. And Naomi? She was about to show him that true power doesn't wear a badge. At the station, Officer Todd paraded Naomi past the booking desk. Her calm demeanor unnerved him more than resistance ever could. The sergeant on duty raised an eyebrow. "What's the charge?" he asked. Todd shrugged. "Disorderly, non-compliance." Naomi said nothing. Instead, she stared directly into the surveillance camera above, a silent protest. It wasn't fear that stiffened her spine. It was fury buried deep under years of practiced poise. Back in her holding cell, Naomi finally spoke when her husband Jonathan stormed in. The precinct fell silent as he revealed his badge. Gold, not silver, and the words "police captain" stitched above his name. "Release her, now," he demanded. Todd, wide-eyed, tried to speak, but Jonathan cut him off. "You arrested my wife without cause. You humiliated a citizen, and you embarrassed this entire department." Gasps rippled through the room. Naomi simply crossed her arms and looked away. The other officers, now sheepish, unlocked the cell. Naomi stepped out with dignity. No tears, no yelling, just a quiet fire in her eyes. Jonathan didn't try to comfort her. He knew better. What Naomi needed now wasn't a hug, it was action. "This isn't over," she said softly. "Not for me. Not for anyone like me." Her words weren't just about the incident. They were about generations of indignity. Her mother, her grandmother, every silenced voice that echoed in her blood. The most dangerous assumption is that someone is powerless. Todd thought he was flexing control over a stranger. But Naomi? Naomi was legacy, leadership, and law. And now she was awake. News of the incident spread faster than fire and dry brush. Social media lit up. Hashtag Justice for Naomi. Hashtag Protect Black Women. Community members rallied outside the precinct by sunrise. Protest signs, chants, and tears mingled in the humid morning air. Local activist groups called for Todd's suspension. To many, Naomi wasn't just another black woman wronged. She was a reflection of every unspoken injustice they had endured. At home, Naomi sat at her kitchen table with her niece, who had watched the arrest online. "Auntie, I didn't know that could happen to someone like you," she said. Naomi took her hand. "That's the lie they want us to believe, that titles or education make us safe, but our skin always walks into the room first." Her voice didn't shake. It sharpened. Every moment in that cell had become fuel. Naomi wasn't interested in revenge. She wanted reform. Jonathan met with the city mayor. "We can't sweep this under the rug," he insisted. The mayor, wary of the upcoming election, nodded. "We'll begin an internal investigation." But Naomi knew what that meant. Paperwork, delays, excuses. So she took it to the people. Community forums, church pulpits, college campuses. Everywhere she spoke, people listened. Naomi wasn't campaigning. She was testifying. Some stories begin in silence. Others begin in handcuffs. But the loudest ones? They begin when someone decides that silence is no longer survival. Naomi had made that choice, and the city could no longer ignore her. Officer Todd sat stiffly in the interrogation room, his badge resting on the table like a burden he could no longer carry. The internal affairs officer across from him had a stack of witness statements. "You've had 5 complaints of excessive force this year alone," she said. Todd scoffed. "Just people trying to make a name off me." But even he could hear the crack in his voice. For the first time in his career, the shield he'd hidden behind felt paper thin. Flashbacks haunted him. Every stop he made with a sneer, every time he pushed someone around without consequence. He'd always believed power meant being untouchable. Now he saw Naomi's face in every corner of that room, unmoved and unbothered by his bravado. Her silence during the arrest had shaken him more than he realized. "You picked the wrong woman," the IA officer muttered, scribbling in her notes. Outside the station, protests continued to swell. Reporters cornered city officials for statements. The story had gone national. Civil rights lawyers were calling. Jonathan had stepped back from public comment, but Naomi's voice was everywhere. On one podcast, she said, "We don't need apologies, we need accountability." Her calm articulation made headlines. Her grace made her dangerous to those who thrived on silence. When the truth begins to echo, it reverberates in the places we least expect, in courtrooms and locker rooms, in the quiet moments before sleep. And for Officer Todd, it had finally caught up with him, not just as a whisper, but as a reckoning. Before Naomi was the wife of a police captain, before the speeches and the activism, she was a girl from Eastwood, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs and never missed a school play. Naomi's first encounter with injustice came at age 10, when a neighbor boy was tackled by police for stealing candy. She remembered the sound of his mother's screams more than the sirens. That night she asked her mother, "Will that ever happen to me?" Her mother didn't answer, just hugged her tighter. Years later, Naomi graduated at the top of her class. Law school followed, not because she loved statutes, but because she hated the silence victims were forced to live in. She remembered every courtroom where the defense looked past her, every time someone assumed she was the assistant and not the attorney. Each insult had carved her into the woman she now was, sharp, resilient, and unapologetic. In an interview, a reporter asked, "Did you expect this reaction?" Naomi smiled faintly. "I didn't expect anything. I demanded it." She wasn't driven by fame or revenge. She wanted young black girls to know that dignity wasn't something the system could revoke. It was something you claimed, even if you had to claw your way through humiliation to reach it. Naomi had become more than a woman wronged. She was a symbol now, and symbols can't be handcuffed. The past isn't just where we come from. It's the soil we bloom from, or burn in. Naomi's past hadn't made her bitter. It made her necessary. City council meetings turned chaotic. Half the room demanded reform. The other half shouted back, defending the good cops they knew. "Don't punish all for the actions of one," they cried. But Naomi's supporters weren't attacking law enforcement. They were demanding it live up to its own promise. Still, the resistance was loud and at times ugly. Naomi received threats. Jonathan was pressured to step down. The tension wasn't just political, it was personal. One night, Naomi stood at a community center podium while hecklers jeered from the back. She paused, let the silence stretch, and said, "If you're more outraged by my voice than his abuse, you're not angry about injustice. You're angry it's being exposed." The room quieted. Even the hecklers didn't know how to answer truth spoken so plainly. Her words cut not with volume, but with precision, like a scalpel to rot. At home, Naomi struggled. Her strength had limits. She stared at her reflection, wondering if she was becoming the very thing she used to fear. Visible, vulnerable, a target. Jonathan wrapped his arms around her. "You don't have to carry it alone." But Naomi shook her head. "That's the thing. I always have." Her voice cracked. The mask was slipping, but even that vulnerability became part of her power. She refused to retreat. Justice isn't won in courtrooms. It's fought for in community halls, in late-night tears, in unrelenting courage. And though the city was torn, Naomi refused to bend. The courtroom buzzed as Naomi walked in, not as a witness, but as legal counsel for a civil rights case filed against the precinct. Her return to the legal field was met with gasps. The same officers who once doubted her credentials now watched her present with surgical precision. She wasn't just seeking damages. She was demanding policy change, mandatory bias training, body cam transparency, and independent citizen oversight. Todd sat behind the defense table, eyes down. Naomi's opening statement was calm, surgical. This is not a case of bad apples. This is about a culture of impunity that punishes truth-telling more than brutality. She presented footage, showed records, and invoked names of other victims silenced before her. Her voice trembled only once, when she said, "If I wasn't married to the captain, would I be here now? Or would I be another forgotten statistic?" The judge, a black woman in her 60s, nodded slowly as Naomi spoke. It wasn't just legal brilliance, it was lived experience being translated into strategy. The opposing counsel faltered. Juries don't just read law, they read people. And Naomi's truth was undeniable. Every juror leaned in closer with each passing hour, drawn by something deeper than facts. Conviction. A courtroom is just a theater of power. But Naomi had flipped the script. She wasn't just playing a role, she was rewriting the narrative. The verdict arrived on a humid afternoon. Naomi stood beside her team as the jury foreman read, "In favor of the plaintiff." Applause burst, followed by tears, not just from Naomi, but from elders in the back row, young girls in the front, and strangers who now felt seen. The judge's ruling also mandated structural reform within the precinct. It was more than a win, it was a signal. A door cracked open where once there had been only walls. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Naomi didn't give sound bites. She stood silently, holding a photo of her mother. "This is for her," she said at last, "and for every woman who knew what dignity looked like even when denied it." Her words went viral. But Naomi didn't linger in the spotlight. She quietly returned to her work, mentoring, speaking, healing. Her victory wasn't just a chapter, it was a seed. Todd resigned within weeks. No fanfare, just a letter and a legacy of disgrace. He moved states, unable to escape the echo of his own decisions. Meanwhile, Naomi was invited to testify before the state Senate. Reform bills bore her fingerprints. And still, she didn't celebrate, not loudly. "We're not finished," she told one interviewer. "We're just getting started." Some wins make headlines, others make history. Naomi's win did both. Months later, Naomi walked through a community mural unveiling. It depicted black women through history, Rosa, Fanny, Maya, and at the end, Naomi. A young girl pointed. "That's her," she shouted. Naomi knelt beside her. "One day, you'll be up there too." The girl smiled wide-eyed. It was in that moment Naomi realized, legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you ignite in others. Back home, she sat with Jonathan on the porch. The sunset was quiet for once. "Do you think anything really changed?" he asked. Naomi looked out at the skyline. "Not everything, but enough to keep fighting." She sipped her tea. The battles ahead didn't scare her, because she knew she wouldn't be alone. Her story had created ripples she'd never fully see. Protest art on buildings, new training centers, a generation rising with new tools and louder voices. Naomi's name is etched in textbooks now, not as a victim, but as a catalyst. A woman who didn't just survive injustice, but who challenged it and dared others to do the same. Power is not in who arrests you. Power is in what you do after they do. Naomi chose to rise, and in doing so, lifted everyone with her.